it's really important in order for your whole story to pay off, right? You have to set up the world in which it takes place, right? You have to set up the logic of the world. You have to set up the logic of your characters. You want to do things in a way where a person can look at, let's say, the first 10 to 15 minutes of the story and its establishment and say, all right, I kind of feel like I know this person in real life, or I can kind of know what they're
Yeah.
like. You know what I mean? Or
Hmm.
like, oh, I've lived in that place before, or I've seen it. I mean, that's not the environment is not as necessary as the character, right? The
Right.
character is absolutely necessary, that you have to set them up in a way that a person can relate to them as like either themselves, a family member, a friend, right? So you go, all right, we have what was the name of the Sam Neill's character in Jurassic Park? Is it
Uh,
Doctor? Or
Dr. Alan Grant.
thank you. Okay, so not not necessarily everybody can relate to his character, but he's a
Sure.
single 40-something guy who is in a kind of was in a romantic relationship with his fellow paleontologist friend, and he's going to go to a park where some crazy billionaire is going to resurrect dinosaurs. So that last part, there's no connecting, right? That's all of the where do we go from here? But everything before that is setting up, all right, here's this guy. Here's his motivations. Here's his particular like things that annoy him, kids,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
um, he doesn't like dealing with bureaucratic red tape. He doesn't like having to deal with other people's problems. He wants to
I-
go ahead.
Importantly, and very importantly, only because this movie is like my holy grail. This is the movie that made me want
Yeah.
to make movies. Um, he does not get along well with technology.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So that's a
That's
big
yeah.
setup for everything else that goes on later on in the movie. So you establish all those things about him, and he's not the only like major character in the movie, obviously, but
Right.
he's he's the one we follow probably the most closely, and he's the one that we really land with at the end of the movie in terms of the themes, the overall themes. And so I'm saying all this because then you have all of the elements that where everything starts to pay off, right? We go into Jurassic Park, crazy shit happens, everything fails
Yep.
magnificently, and the story becomes not only about like surviving dinosaurs, it becomes about growing as a person because he does take on this journey of where he grows in protecting the lives of these two kids, helping them through Jurassic Park. He suddenly has this parental connection that he never had previously and has a new perspective. So that becomes thematically a payoff to what is set up at the beginning of the movie. And it's really important in a movie that you are in a story, in any story, that your character goes through that kind of arc so that you can have something for the audience to connect to ultimately at the end of the day. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I feel like when you go into a story, doesn't matter what it is. When you go
Yeah.
in, you want to experience things safely. This is one of the reasons why horror is such a big thing, but safely so that you can absorb some kind of life lesson out of it. Now, granted that to me you should really only be tapping into if you want to be an effective storyteller, you should be tapping into primal things. Primal moralities that I think are almost universal. When you start getting into like social debates about abortion or how people should get paid minimum
Yeah.
wage and stuff like that, it automatically turns into cringe because you're either preaching to a choir or you're trying to preach to somebody who has had some kind of alternative life experiences that disagree with that, and they're just not going to listen to anything you have to say. But if you tap into something that's morally universal, um, you're much more likely to have your audience latch on because it's like, okay, here's what the artist is telling me, and now I can interpret that in a way that I can apply to my life. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
Alan Grant goes from someone who didn't want to have kids and he doesn't understand kids and he doesn't like kids to the end, he just kind of realizes like this is an opportunity for me to pass on knowledge to these kids
Yeah.
and some fulfillment in his life and protecting them. And he grows in his relationship and his connective relationship with Dr. Ellie Sattler. Like, he
Yeah.
gets why she's got those maternal instincts. Like, he grows as a person. So when you watch that movie, it's like, okay, I get it. Like, being a parent is a lot of work protecting kids from all the crazy shit that's happening in
Yeah.
the world around us.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, it can be very rewarding. And I speak to that now as a father myself. Like, I'm operating off of very little sleep these days, and I'll tell you something. Before I had my kid, sleep was one of my most prized possessions. Um, and I do miss sleep. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but every time my kid is in my arms and he smiles at me, man, it changes my world. And I was always one of those guys that never wanted to hold a baby. Like, I would go someplace with my wife or whatever, and someone would have a kid. And, oh, you want to hold the baby? No, I'm good. I don't want to drop it. I'm afraid I'm going to do this and that. Now I'm in the world where it's like you got to hold the baby. It's your baby. Mom's got to
Yeah.
go take a shower. So it's one of those things where you go to a story to grow and tell. So embedding a setup and a payoff, that's telling the story and the growth of that character. That's what really kind of allows the person to, or the audience member, to experience that lesson without having to go through it, because not everybody
Yeah.
can afford to have a kid right now,
Right.
or ever for that matter. Or maybe they're just fearful about having a kid, but you can experience that kind of opportunity to grow and gain that wisdom vicariously through the story. But that insertion of unexpected twists and mutations, as you called it, of the payoffs is what makes it lifelike. It's what draws you into the story. So you're not checking your phone, you're not looking at your watch,
Right.
you're not thinking about other things, what you're going to have for dinner. It's about just about experiencing that thing and living in that
Yeah.
world, living in that character. And I think setups and payoffs are a very valuable asset for any storyteller to communicate whatever it is they're trying to communicate in their story.